DHL did a number on this box. I'm surprised the keyboard still works. Mountain. Here's a company that brought us the most interesting full-size modular keyboard with that gimmicky but really super useful media control thingy. And now they're launching their version of a 60% keyboard, which has dedicated arrow keys, very much like a 65% keyboard would. It's HotSwap, of course, with PBT keycaps, and it also has 5 USB-C ports. What? No big deal. So you know it's going to be good, although they did forget to include a tilde key until it was finally fixed with the software update. So let's start with the form factor of the Everest 60. It's interesting because it is 1 column smaller than your standard 65% layout, yet it still has the arrow keys and the oh so important delete key, which has its own switch and not like on 60% other keyboards that is usually hidden behind function backspace. So this way it's so much more functional. And this gives Mountain pretty big advantage in the 60% space, but also you kind of decide if the size difference between a 65% keyboard is different enough, because basically it's kind of a 65% keyboard in disguise of a 60% model number. I do love the frame details though, with this brushed texture around the keycaps and a small cavity in which the switches are installed, and this tiny edge creates a very pretty additional layer of illumination at certain angles. Not sure if that was intentional though, but it is beautiful. Plus we also have that single running diffusion layer all around the keyboard that matches very well to the color and brightness of the switches, but it could use an extra layer of diffusion as the LED hotspots are visible throughout. And that's probably my only minor complaint about the design, is otherwise this thing is amazing to type on and to kind of just visually admire. As for the lighting tab, it's very basic but also really simple to navigate with different effects that immediately reflect on what's happening on the keyboard. And of course we have the custom tab to select your perimeter lighting and the interior lighting as well. Per key lighting customization that is reflected immediately. Very nice. Also, I love the hot swap nature that is reflected in the software right away. Check this out. Boom. Beautiful. Now, some of my favorite elements on this Everest include clever elevation. So we have these magnets that you can stack and raise the angle of the keyboard. Not only are they my new favorite fidget spinner, they're so fantastic and easy to play with, but they have strong magnets so the keyboard does not topple over, and the rubber bits really secure the board in place. At the back we have 3 USB-C port locations, letting you decide where you want the cable to exit, and this would easily support aftermarket cables. The only issue is that the cable is a little wobbly inside the port, and they do not work as a data hub, so you have to use 1 USB-C port at a time. And if you've been paying attention, now is the perfect time to introduce today's video sponsor. The new H1 from NZXT is the perfect hassle-free ITX experience with lots of power, pre-routed cables, a capable 140mm all-in-one cooler with its own fan controller, and massively compact GPU chamber that is actively cooled for them good temps. The H1 V2, check it out below. So let's get to the most interesting bits, shall we? So first, the hot swap nature of the numpad is really nice. You don't need to unplug the keyboard, and the module is instantly recognized in the software on the correct side and with the same RGB effect. The 3-prong mount is strong enough if you handle the keyboard gently. Just make sure that both parts are raised on the same level. Now, I'm sure many love using the numpad for all the number crunching, but perhaps want a smaller keyboard experience, and the Everest 60 is kind of the best of both worlds. So not only can you reposition the numpad on either side of the keyboard, it's also significantly smaller than a full-size keyboard and perhaps even more functional than a TKL option, provided you don't really care about the F-row. So you can position it on the right for easy reach, position it on the left to make more room for your mouse, and actually use the numpad in games for maybe macro assignments or whatever else. I love this flexibility. So the numpad for the Everest 60 is sold separately. They are kind of known to introduce these DLC type upgrades for their keyboards, but it doesn't come with a USB-C female to male adapter like we saw with the Everest Max. I think that would have been a fantastic value add. The keyboard is also hot swappable with 3 and 5-pin switch compatibility, which is fantastic, letting you really diversify later and switch around based on feel. The keycaps are double shot PBT with what feels like the smoothest PBT texture to touch my skin. I really quite like it. The font is not as sharp though, and other competing PBT sets offer a little bit of a clear lettering, and there are plenty of double shot imperfections throughout that you can see. Also, because of the unconventional layout to the right of the spacebar, if you are swapping keycaps, make sure there is a 1U shift keycap included in that set. And so that's pretty good that the additional Mountain sets look very pretty with the white and green sets in particular, but having no other color for the keyboard base aside from black means slightly darker keycaps work better for this thing. Also notice something really strange for a 60% keyboard. We have no secondary legends on the keycaps. So Ducky, Razer, and even Corsair are better in this regard. Of course, you can try to memorize the hotkeys from the manual, but it's always better to have them included on the keycaps instead. So this is a pretty big oversight for Mountain. However, they got the most important thing right, and that's the typing experience for a stock keyboard feels absolutely incredible. So not only do they manually lube their switches and the stabilizers for an absolutely smooth up and down, they also clip the stabs for rattle-free typing. There's a layer of silicone dampening at the bottom of the base to add some weight and also improve the acoustics. And there are also 2 more foam layers below and above the PCB for just improved acoustics all around. It's a very talky experience out of the box and surprisingly quiet too with these linear switches. Take a listen. You can tell the lubing is manual because my backspace sounds like it needs more of it, but the spacebar and all the other switches feel really pleasant. All the key binds are pretty straightforward and you can rebind everything on this keyboard. Everything is visually represented on what is bound, what is disabled, what is selected, and what is a default. And of course we have macro recordings, pretty standard stuff. And now in the settings, so this is where things get a little bit complicated because the keyboard has game mode enabled, which allows you to disable certain keys and certain key combinations. But the keyboard doesn't actually tell you when game mode is enabled. So you have to press Function and Windows to enable game mode. So right now I disabled it, which means if I enable any of these functions, they will not work. So for example, my Windows key still works, my Alt Tab still works. So you have to enable Function and Windows key to go back into game mode. Again, nothing on screen to tell you that the game mode is enabled, but now look at this. Nothing is working that you have selected. So in that sense, it works as it should, but I would love for Mountain to give us a game mode like toggle that shows you when it's on and when it's off. Now the pricing is very interesting because the keyboard alone is $140, $160 if you want an extra set of PBT keycaps, and $190 for the NUMPAD edition. Yeah, so this thing alone is 50 bucks. It is very much an ouch. So how much do you value a removable and left-friendly numpad? So take into context versus other 60 and 65% offerings, I say the Everest 60 is worth it for all the lubing alone, and the keyboard feels significantly better and more premium versus many of the keyboards that are listed on the screen. The only concern is the mass production variance between lubing amounts, as otherwise, I would say the keyboard is perfect. All right guys, I'm Dmitry, thanks so much for watching, and as always, climb responsibly, my friends.